What if the strongest currency on earth is not as untouchable as we believe? History has a quiet way of warning us. In Weimar Germany, millions became billions overnight. In Zimbabwe, people carried cash in buckets. In Argentina, entire savings vanished between breakfast and dinner. Different nations, different leaders, same pattern, same mistake. So here's the unsettling question. If every unbreakable currency in history eventually faced its greatest test, what happens when the next one standing in front of that test is the US dollar? Picture a city where money loses value faster than people can count it, where salaries become meaningless by the time workers walk home, where stores don't bother changing price tags because prices change every hour. This was Weimar Germany in 1923. At first, it didn't look like collapse. It looked like temporary printing, a quick fix for war debt and recession. But within months, inflation didn't rise. It detonated. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January cost 200,000 million marks by November. Workers were paid twice a day because waiting until evening meant starvation. Factories used banknotes as fuel because burning money was cheaper than buying coal. And the terrifying part? No one believed it would happen. Not in Germany, not to them. Nearly a century later, Zimbabwe repeated the script. The government printed money to stimulate growth until inflation hit 231 million%. Bank withdrawals were limited to the equivalent of a few US dollars. People stopped carrying wallets, they carried backpacks. Then Argentina, a modern economy, educated population, global trade, yet its currency collapsed 5 separate times in 40 years, wiping out savings generation after generation. The tragic pattern was identical. Each government promised recovery, while sacrificing the value of its currency to pay yesterday's bills. 3 nations, 3 decades, 3 completely different political systems. And still, the same chain reaction. A crisis begins. Leaders choose the fastest solution. Money printing accelerates. Confidence erodes. And once trust dies, so does the currency. There is no single moment when collapse becomes irreversible. No alarm bell, no countdown. Only a slow, creeping shift, until one day, the entire system breaks. The most frightening part is not the collapse itself. It's how normal everything looks right before it happens. History has a way of repeating itself, almost like a cold, calculated experiment. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Argentina. 3 nations, 3 crises, 1 identical pattern. Stage 1. Crisis emerges. Every collapse begins with a shock. In Weimar Germany, the Treaty of Versailles imposed crushing reparations after World War I. The economy staggered. Unemployment soared. The government faced a choice: accept defeat or spend its way out. They chose printing. In Zimbabwe, post-independence optimism turned to desperation. Land reforms backfired. Production fell. The government, desperate to maintain social promises, printed money to cover deficits. Argentina faced recurring debt crises. External borrowing ballooned. When payments came due, leaders turned to the same solution: printing money and devaluing currency. Stage 2. Money printing accelerates. At first, printing seems harmless. A few billion marks, a few million Zimbabwean dollars, a few pesos, but governments underestimate the exponential effect. In Germany, monthly money printing jumped from 3 billion marks in 1922 to over 500 billion by mid-1923. In Zimbabwe, monthly currency growth reached unimaginable heights, over $500 trillion in 2008. Argentina repeated the cycle 5 times in 40 years. The lesson: short-term relief hides long-term destruction. Stage 3. Prices skyrocket. Inflation begins slow, almost invisible. Then it explodes. Germany, bread prices doubled daily. Zimbabwe, a loaf cost more than a farmer's monthly wage. Argentina, hyperinflation erased middle-class savings multiple times. Patterns match perfectly. Each collapse followed the same trajectory. Confidence in money disappears faster than politicians can respond. Stage 4. Public panic and behavioral shift. Citizens stop trusting banks or wallets. In Germany, workers carried wheelbarrows filled with cash. In Zimbabwe, backpacks became standard. Argentina's middle class fled to dollars, commodities, or foreign banks. The pattern is unmistakable. Once confidence is gone, no policy can restore it immediately. Panic spreads faster than legislation. Stage 5. Government reaction leaders double down. They print more money to pay debts, believing inflation is temporary. In Germany, emergency decrees legitimized uncontrolled printing. In Zimbabwe, hyperinflation became policy. Argentina continually devalued the peso. Every time, the same mistake, attempting to solve a liquidity problem with more money. The very tool that caused the crisis is wielded as a cure. Stage 6. Collapse or devaluation. Eventually, reality catches up. Currencies crash, savings evaporate, and markets implode. Weimar Germany adopted the Rentenmark to stabilize. Zimbabwe abandoned its dollar in 2009. Argentina turned repeatedly to IMF programs and currency redenomination. Each solution works only temporarily. The underlying pattern, over-reliance on printing to cover deficits, remains. Stage 7. Global consequences. No collapse exists in isolation. Germany's inflation destabilized Europe. Zimbabwe's crisis caused regional trade disruption. Argentina's repeated failures shook investor confidence across Latin America. The pattern repeats globally. One country's currency crisis creates ripple effects beyond borders. The repeating formula. Look closely and you'll see a formula emerge. Economic shock. 2. Money printing. 3. Rapid inflation. 4. Public panic. 5. Government doubles down. 6. Collapse or massive devaluation. 7. Wider consequences. 3 countries, 3 decades, 1 immutable pattern. Even more chilling. Small deviations do not matter. It doesn't matter if it's a European democracy, a post-colonial African state, or a modern Latin economy. Once governments trade long-term stability for short-term fixes, the pattern emerges. Trust in money erodes. Confidence dies. Inflation explodes. Collapse follows. History is brutally consistent. Every collapse has a recognizable rhythm. Every mistake has been repeated. Every warning ignored. And now, look at the present. The US dollar is still the king, yet global reserves in dollars have dropped from 70% to 58% over the past 2 decades. Some countries are quietly trading outside the dollar system. It is not a collapse yet. But the rhythm is there. The pattern is there. The same sequence that destroyed Germany, Zimbabwe, and Argentina is quietly ticking in the background. The US dollar has ruled the world for decades. It has been the safe haven, the backbone of trade, the ultimate measure of wealth. But even kings have rivals. Global reserves held in dollars have slipped from 70% in 2000 to roughly 58% today. Not a collapse, but a shift. Several large economies, including China, Russia, and the European Union, are quietly trading outside the dollar system. They are hedging against the inevitable. Look closer. Debt is rising faster than at any time in history. The U.S. government owes over $35 trillion today, more than 120% of GDP. Interest payments are climbing, consuming the equivalent of entire federal budgets from only a decade ago. Every economic shock, war, pandemic, financial crisis pushes printing presses into overdrive. It is the same first step Germany, Zimbabwe, and Argentina took. Confidence is subtle. It disappears slowly, almost imperceptibly. A weakening dollar doesn't crash overnight. It erodes purchasing power in grocery stores, in retirement accounts, in investment portfolios. Citizens trust the currency because it has always worked. History warns that trust is fragile, and yet people assume it can't happen here. The phrase echoes like a mantra. The dollar is untouchable. America is too strong. Our currency is safe. But every empire, every reserve currency in history has faced the same hubris. The British pound, once global, faded. The French franc disappeared. The German mark was replaced. All succumbed to the pattern. Economic shock, money printing, loss of confidence, collapse. Today, the U.S. is not Zimbabwe. It is not Weimar Germany. Its institutions are strong. Its economy is massive. But the pattern doesn't care about strength or size. It only cares about trust. Once trust falters, the sequence accelerates. What looks permanent can unravel quietly, incrementally, in decisions that seem small at the time. Look at global trade. Countries are diversifying reserves. Oil trades increasingly in yuan, not dollars. Gold is moving quietly into new vaults. It's not panic, it's precaution. Yet precaution is a warning. History whispers the clock is ticking. The rhythm of collapse is familiar. We may not see it in headlines tomorrow, but the pattern is unmistakable. Every step, the debt, the printing, the confidence erosion, mirrors what destroyed currencies before. The question is no longer if it can happen. The question is when, and how fast will the shift accelerate once confidence begins to crack? Because when it starts, history shows the pace is relentless. It doesn't pause for debate. It doesn't wait for elections. It sweeps through nations like a tide, and no one can outrun it. The story is clear. Across centuries, continents, and political systems, the pattern repeats with brutal consistency. Economic shock, rapid money printing, inflation spirals, confidence collapses, currency dies. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Argentina, each is a textbook example. Different eras, different leaders, different ideologies. Yet the underlying law is identical. Trust in money is the invisible pillar of any economy. Destroy that pillar and the structure collapses no matter how strong it seems. Now, the US dollar stands as the world's reserve currency. Its dominance is unrivaled. Its institutions are sophisticated. Its markets are deep. But the dollar is not immune to the same rules. Debt is high. Deficits are persistent. Global reserves are shifting. Printing presses are ready at the first shock. Every condition that preceded historical collapses is present, though perhaps in milder form, for now. History does not lie. It doesn't negotiate. Patterns are laws, not predictions. Weimar didn't print marks because they wanted to destroy Germany. Zimbabwe didn't hyperinflate because they wished to fail. And Argentina didn't collapse because leaders were careless. They fell because the logic of the system demanded it. The sequence is unstoppable once set in motion. Short-term solutions for long-term problems always carry hidden costs. Trust erodes silently. Confidence dies incrementally. When the tipping point comes, the collapse is inevitable. Not sudden, but relentless. We cannot assume America is different. No empire, no reserve currency, no institution has defied this pattern indefinitely. Even today's dollar, backed by the largest economy on earth, is subject to the same invisible law. It is not a question of strength, technology, or power. It is a question of psychology, of perception, of trust. The logical conclusion is uncomfortably simple. The current system cannot remain unchanged forever. It is only a matter of timing and sequence. History suggests that once the conditions align, debt, printing, inflation, eroding confidence, the pattern accelerates faster than anyone anticipates. Preparation and awareness are the only defenses. Not panic, not denial, not assumption that it can't happen here. The lesson echoes through time. Economies are fragile, even when they appear unshakable. Empires do not collapse overnight. Currencies do not die in a single day. They fade. One policy, one decision, one misplaced calculation at a time. The dollar may still reign, but history reminds us, reigns are temporary, patterns endure. And there it is, the final truth. Strength, size, and power cannot outrun the rhythm of history. The collapse of any currency is not random. It is the inevitable result of human behavior repeated over centuries. The law of money is impartial, it is unforgiving, and it is approaching, whether we see it or not. History has a way of humbling even the most powerful nations. It whispers a simple, chilling truth. No currency, no empire, no economy is untouchable. The most dangerous sentence in history is, "It can't happen here." We tell ourselves that because the US dollar is strong, because America is stable, because institutions seem unbreakable. But every empire, every reserve currency once believed the same. And every one of them eventually faced its reckoning. Collapse doesn't arrive as a thunderclap. It comes quietly, almost imperceptibly, one decision at a time, one debt here, one print run there. Confidence fades, slowly at first, then faster than anyone realizes. And that is the lesson we must carry forward. Vigilance is not panic. Awareness is not fear. Understanding the pattern allows us to act wisely, to protect wealth, and to question assumptions we take for granted. It is about preparation, foresight, and respect for history. Ask yourself, where are we in this cycle today? Are we seeing the first subtle cracks, or are we still at the calm before the storm? What choices will define the strength of the dollar tomorrow? Because as history shows, the difference between stability and collapse is measured not in years, but in decisions, one by one. The past is not a prophecy, it is a guide. And for those willing to study it, the lessons are clear. Trust is fragile, patterns repeat, and vigilance is the only true shield. If you want to understand the next chapter of the dollar, its silent shifts, and what history warns us about the choices ahead, stay with me. Because the story of money is never truly over, it's only evolving.